Hey guys, get excited. I'm bringing you the best pet frog, Bombina orientalis, the Firebelly toad. Hey guys, Tim Nichols from FirebellyToads.com. Like, subscribe, and share this video if you love frogs. Today I'm bringing you the full care guide to Bombina orientalis, the Firebelly toad. Guys, I love Firebelly toads. They are the very best frog that you can have as a pet. They've got personality. They are easy to care for, super easy to care for. Aquarium setup, super easy. Guys, when it comes to Firebelly toads, you put food in there, they can almost eat out of your hand. These things are so fun. Each one has a personality, and they really get to know you. They are essentially like little puppies in an aquarium. The best personality of any frog that I've ever had. And I've had them all, from red-eyed tree frogs to dart frogs. Firebelly toads, the best. The reason I don't like tree frogs is they often sleep during the day, especially the red-eyed tree frogs. They're all nocturnal. That means when you're wanting to go out there and have fun with them and look at them, they're sleeping during the day. And then if you turn on a black light, my red-eyed tree frogs would just go up into a little green ball on the glass. It was so sad because I loved the photos of red-eyed tree frogs. I loved my red-eyed tree frogs. But honestly, they were too boring for me because the more I took care of them, the less I saw them. Firebelly toads, they're out during the day, they're out during the night, they're always active. They're an amazing frog to have. Now, today we're talking about Bombina orientalis, Firebelly toads, but you may hear me talk about and call them frogs. It's because they're more closely warty frogs than they are actually toads. But Firebelly toads is the name they were given because they have warts on them. So we kind of use both terms for these frogs, toads, you know, whichever term you will. These things love being in the water. They love swimming. They love you dropping food in there. They love getting to know you, which is awesome. These things are awesome. They're easy, and they're by far the very best pet frog you can have. Now, one of the things I love about Firebelly toads is those fire bellies. While the tops can range from a lime green to sometimes like a blue-green to a brown, these Firebelly toads are some of the most vibrant, spectacular, colorful frogs you can have in an aquarium. Those bellies that are just simply amazing with those fire engine red bellies with mottled black in there. That is spectacular. Now, those bellies can range from yellow to more of that orange, red, fiery red that you see. You know, adding more carotenoids to their diet can definitely intensify those colors. Y'all, that's just one of the most amazing things about these things, are those bright, vibrant colors. It's fun to have a frog, but it's even better to have a frog that can just give you some just amazing colors. And as they're swimming around here in the aquarium, that bottom part of the frog is just so bright and vibrant. Now, natively in the wild, they have this thing called an Unken reflex, and they'll actually turn upside down and display those bright, vibrant color bellies so that it sort of wardens off predators. Kind of cool. We don't see that much in captivity because they're not scared of people. They're used to the food that people bring them, and that makes them so natural of a frog to have as a pet. I mean, you put food in the aquarium and the frogs pay attention and start coming to you. Their personalities are some of the best of any frog that I can imagine. One of the reasons I love these is you can have colonies of these. You know, dart frogs, you have to limit your colonies, and you start getting different frogs trying to show dominance over one another. You have to figure out how many males, how many females you have. Not with Firebelly toads. Males, females, they can go in the same colony. Your numbers don't necessarily matter unless you're trying to breed. Guys, Firebelly toads, the best pet frog. Let me tell you a little bit about aquarium setup. Guys, for aquariums, you can start off with an aquarium. You can have an aquarium that say is like a 20-gallon. That can actually fit between 3 and 5 adult Firebelly toads. If you've got a 40-gallon, between 6 and 10. So literally you can put in a lot of Firebelly toads in a relatively small amount of space. Gives you more to watch, more for them to interact with each other. That is an amazing thing about these Firebelly toads, is the fact that you can have a colony of them. Now, there are multiple ways to have a Firebelly toad colony or Firebelly toad aquarium. One is a terrestrial setup where you have to have some water dishes because they really do prefer a lot of water. I personally prefer a 50% water, 50% land setup. I think that's one of the best ways that you can have a setup, especially if you're doing like a polydarium type setup. I'm gonna have future videos on how to set up the perfect polydarium for your Firebelly toad, but right now I'm gonna talk to you about the easiest way to set up your Firebelly toad setup. Here, I'm in one of my side living rooms. I'm about to be moving to a new location. When I do that, I'm gonna have a whole new space for all my Firebelly toads and my crayfish. And that means that I'm gonna be able to have a lot more room and a lot more frog setup and a lot of tanks. So a lot of cool things coming on this channel, so do like and subscribe. But the easiest way, by far the easiest way to get your aquarium set up is fill up about 4 to 5 inches of water and then put floating corkboard in your aquarium. The floating corkboard provides that land area and allows the frogs to have this land area right near the water to hop in and enjoy the water, swim around. And it also gives you something that you can actually feed them on. So you can put their food on this floating corkboard and they'll go in and just really eat all your food that you're putting out there. You're also feeding these live insects. And when you're feeding Firebelly toads live insects, they're gonna run around on the corkboard and it gives the Firebelly toad something to chase. And they do fantastic feeding on these corkboards. The floating corkboard gives them that land, and about 50% of the water should be covered with floating corkboard or floating cork bark, either one. Now, the other thing I love for plants is pothos. Pothos are an amazing thing to have in your aquariums. They take out a lot of nitrates and keep your frogs healthy. I think that's a great thing to have in there. And you see I've got a lot of pothos in here. They'll sort of put roots around. They really start to filter out a lot of those nitrates so that your frogs don't experience any nitrates burn. Aquariums like this, important to do water changes about 30% once a month. So what I'll do is I'll come get an aquarium pump out. I'll pump out about 30% of the water, then I'll fill it back up. So keep that in mind, 30% water changes once a month with your Firebelly toads. The other type of thing is you gotta know you've gotta have a filter. Again, we wanna keep this all happening and you wanna keep all of these frogs really happy. I personally like to put sponge filters in these aquariums. I'll often oversize my sponge filter. You know, if this is a 35-gallon size tank, I may use a much larger sponge filter, one of the larger sponge filters that I can find, to really make sure that we're really filtering this. And sponge filters are a great way to keep future tadpoles safe if you're thinking about breeding Firebelly toads, so they don't get sucked up in a filter. On top of that, I really think that a great way to have almost a bioactive setup in your water tanks is to add water daphnia. Water daphnia are another filtration system, and you can order water daphnia online. You can order it already hatched out. Guys, that's expensive because you're shipping water. But on Amazon, I often order the eggs, and I'll go in and sprinkle them into the aquariums, in each of my aquariums, and then those eggs in 3 to 4 weeks hatch out, and they start making water daphnia. And then those things start multiplying from all the waste the frogs produce, and they start filtering that out. That's an awesome way to add an extra filtration-like system in your aquariums. And sometimes if those water daphnia are all getting towards the top, sometimes the frogs go and eat them too. So it adds an additional food source for your Firebelly toads, but you get that filtration as well. One thing that I think is really important for the aquariums is lighting. Lighting is essential because it helps the plants really thrive and do well in your aquarium. I often look for something that has a full UVB spectrum and can really give off the adequate amount of light. Bombina orientalis, they don't need heat lamps. You know, if you're a reptile keeper, you're so familiar with reptiles needing heat lamps. These amphibians don't. They're perfectly fine at room temperature. But these lights will actually also allow them to be able to have a great color and good bone structure if you give them an adequate amount of light. So keep that in mind. The proper lights are always important. The most important key feature to this whole aquarium when you have a frog, obviously the water and the floating cork board, at least 50% land, but lids. These frogs are, in fact, escape artists. Firebelly toads are known for essentially climbing the glass. They're not a tree frog, but they are a frog that will stick to glass and they'll start climbing up in the corners. And you'll find them sometimes up in the corners as you're opening your aquarium to feed them. Do keep an eye on your frogs as you're opening and closing your containers. So the last thing you want to do is close up your container on your Firebelly toad. But the fact that you have a lid on top, this keeps the frogs in the enclosure, in the habitat you created, in the humidity you've created, so that these frogs can really thrive and do well. Once they climb out and they disappear and you have to go chase them around your house, that's a whole nother story. So do keep them in your aquariums and keep that lid on there tight. In most conditions, the very best condition I would find for most aquariums is an aquarium that has a 50% covered lid and a 50% screen lid. I think that's going to be your best ability to keep good humidity in there, but not too much humidity in for these Firebelly toads. What do I feed my Firebelly toads? Well, typically live insects. The most common thing is all of the frogs I'm currently selling as juveniles, they're already eating 1/4 inch size crickets. 1/4 inch size crickets can be found at most of your local pet stores. And what I do is actually, I go in and I dust them. The two things that I love using to dusting, one, I have Repashy Superfoods Calcium Plus. I use that because it gives our frogs a lot of calcium, and you dust the crickets in that really helps. Calcium is great for the bone density of your frog, and it keeps your frogs healthy and happy. The other thing that I love using is this right here. This is Repashy Super Pig Reptile Amphibian Carotenoid Supplement. The reason that's important is the red bellies on Firebelly toads is brought out most when these frogs are eating carotenoids. Now, you can get carotenoid supplement that's just plain all by itself, but often what happens is if a Firebelly toad eats something just covered alone, and let's say you did a cricket that's just covered alone in carotenoid, it'll often spit it back out because the carotenoid itself doesn't have that great of a flavor. But the Super Pig, frogs don't mind it too much, and I often add it in the same time I'm adding the calcium. So I mix both of them in when I'm putting it on the crickets. Now, feeding the frogs. I typically feed my Firebelly toads about every other day, at least 3 times a week. Now, one of those times a week is going to be crickets. Crickets, though, buying crickets, can start to get more expensive if you're doing that every other day. So what I actually like to do, and I've found this has been a great way for my Firebelly toads to have a lot of calcium and carotenoid supplements, is I love to feed them fruit flies. High-eye fruit flies that are flightless are fantastic food sources when covered with both the calcium and the Super Pig carotenoids. This can add an additional food source, and it's easy to create. I'll probably shoot some videos later on how I actually use Repashy fruit fly mix and breed these so that I have a lower expense on my Firebelly toad food bill. But these high-eyes are larger. I often don't use the melon castor fruit flies because they're smaller. I use those sometimes with my fresh out of the water like tadpoles that have just became frogs. Those are often a great food source for them, but if you feed your tadpoles enough as they're developing, when they get out of the water, they'll actually be able to eat these high-eye fruit flies as well. These high-eye fruit flies are fantastic. I also have golden high-eye, and I'm not sure which fruit fly I like best, but I'm feeding these at least once a week to reduce my food bill on my Firebelly toads. You know, food bills on any animal are costly. I like to find ways where I can reduce that. These fruit flies are a great way where I can drop some fruit flies in with some fruit fly mixture, and then, you know, in 30 days I start having lots and lots of fruit flies. I typically keep about 15 of these at all times on rotation, just so I've always got extra fruit flies around if I want to feed them and watch the frogs jump around. These are a great way to do it. And again, the golden hydei and the hydei both are large enough that they can survive, they can supply an adequate amount of food. My baby Firebelly toads, my juveniles, and my adults can all eat on these. But I often do find that sometimes with my adults, I will go in, I'll cut up some red worms, throw in there as well. They love going in and eating some red worms or some earthworms that have been cut up into really small sections. Night crawlers, if you cut them up and they would just wiggle a little bit, Firebelly toads love that. They can eat pretty much any insect, but they're super durable. And I love Firebelly toads because of that. The temps on Firebelly toads are, they can survive down to the low 50s, all the way up to the mid 80s, to high 80s if you really have to, but that makes room temperature so easy for Firebelly toads. It makes it a great aquarium pet because 72 degrees is right there, a slap in the middle. You don't have to heat these tanks. You don't have to cool these tanks. For years I tried doing axolotls. My business name for FirebellyToads.com is actually Amazing Axolotls LLC. Axolotls, I always had to be cooling down the tanks, trying to keep those temperatures down enough so those axolotls could really survive and do well. And things like dart frogs, I was always trying to heat the tanks. Guys, Firebelly toads, they're happy, just happy at room temperature. That makes it so easy to have in a tank. Now, with Firebelly toads, again, we talked about the aquarium setup, basic aquarium setup. We talked about food. Guys, we talked a little about temperatures and water changes. Firebelly toads, to me, are the best frog you can have. And they're super easy to breed as well. One thing that this tank right here actually is a little bit murky right now because I went through and was just catching some of the tadpoles in the bottom of this tank and putting them into a separate tank so I could really make sure that these tadpoles, you know, really morph out well, get fed well. And when they morph out, I have them in a tank that only has about 1.5 to 2 inches of water so that they don't drown at an early stage. That's one of the biggest things with baby Firebelly toads, is making sure you don't put them in too much water and allow them to drown. Online, you'll see that people say with frogs, you don't want to mix frogs of different sizes, really big frogs and really little frogs. Well, I gotta be honest, I've done that, and as long as you feed your frogs adequately, you typically don't have those larger frogs predating on your smaller frogs, as long as they're fed well. So once you quit feeding those frogs, they'll start eating those smaller frogs. Just to be safe, I've got a whole separate tank for my smaller baby frogs, then my adults and my juveniles. But again, that's primarily just to make sure that they don't drown. We reduce the amount of water, and we really make sure that there's lots of things for those frogs to crawl up on, and I can make sure that I can feed them melon castor if they are a little bit smaller, fruit flies, or the hydei's once they get a little bit larger, and then we start working them onto those 1/4 inch crickets. When it comes to Firebelly toads, these things are super easy to breed. Literally, if you have female Firebelly toads and male Firebelly toads, typically in the spring, these things will really start breeding. Now, one thing you can do to encourage this is use lights. When you have lights of Firebelly toads that you can put on 12-hour increments and then turn off, that increases the amount of daylight. And then water changes will also help. Frequent feedings, increasing those frequent feedings a little bit, that'll also encourage mating. One thing is, you can see over here in this particular tank, I actually have a Reptizoo mister in here, creating mist in here, creating the simulation of rain. And that gets those frogs into that breeding mode as well. Again, I haven't had many Sorry guys, my 11-month-old child just was waking up, making some noises back there in the background. Guys, Firebelly toads, super easy to breed though. That Reptizoo mixture simulates the rain, gets the frogs into action a little bit, and then the frogs go into an aplexus motion, or aplexion position where the male grabs onto the back of the female, and the females, if they're full of eggs, will start putting eggs out across some of those pothos. I also like to put some guppy grass into some of these tanks just to increase places for those frogs to lay eggs. And that's a great way to have an area where these Firebelly toads can breed. One thing to keep note, neocardinia shrimp, some people keep them with Firebelly toads, and you can do that. Firebelly toads can definitely be kept with neocardinia shrimp, but they will be ate by Firebelly toads. Other shrimp may actually go in and try to eat Firebelly toad eggs, so keep that in mind. Especially guppies will sometimes predate and eat small tadpoles from the Firebelly toads just right as they hatch out from that egg. So guppies, while they can go in a colony, if you're looking at breeding, not a good idea. Typically Firebelly toads are best. Typically Firebelly toads are best when kept alone. I think he's woke up enough, so I went ahead and sat him in his walker. Firebelly toads, people often ask, are Firebelly toads poisonous? Well, the simple answer is yes, but not really. If you're trying to eat them, they're definitely something that can be poisonous. Guys, just don't eat your Firebelly toads, you're gonna be safe. Wash your hands after, protect yourself, but also if you're touching your Firebelly toads, they're amphibians. Wash your hands before you touch them to protect them. So keep that in mind. Wash your hands with any reptile and amphibian, you're gonna be safe. Just wash your hands, keep them in the aquarium. These things are gonna be amazing pets that you're gonna love. Guys, on FirebellyToads.com, we offer Firebelly toads shipped directly to your door. I'm Tim Nichols from MrMaple.com. I've really found ways to ship Japanese maples live plants all around the country, and I've really gotten into shipping Firebelly toads as well. And by doing this, you can get a live creature shipped to your door safely. And guys, I've had a lot of success so far. I look forward to offering a lot of these fun Firebelly toads, and hopefully in the future, some different variations coming out the pipeline as well. I'm working on some breeding projects. Can't wait to keep you informed on all this stuff. If you like this type of stuff, like, subscribe, and share. And y'all, thank y'all so much. Take care, God bless, and have a great day.
You